A store full of comic book fans turned out. They'd been waiting all week to meet this man, Bob Layton, the comic book artist responsible for such characters as Iron Man and Spider-Man. Out in the street, Bob Layton's arrival wasn't exactly treated like a presidential visit.
Bob Layton, does that sound familiar?
Bob Layton. Sounds like a Bob Layton Chevrolet. Is it a Layton Chevrolet? I think there is an automobile dealership by that name.
He's one of the greatest comic book artists alive.
Bob Layton is the first comic book artist in modern history to show Galactus with his helmet off.
I couldn't afford to go to college because I was relatively poor. And I just really decided I was going to teach myself and get into comics. So I started publishing my own little amateur comics. And I started sending them to the comic book companies. And finally somebody happened to notice it after I got to a point where I developed enough that it looked even tolerable. And one of the guys called me and asked me if I'd be interested in working as his apprentice. So I packed up everything I had. I had $200 in my pocket, and I drove to Connecticut, where the guy lived. I wound up, sending samples up, and got work. I've been working there ever since. It's like a dream come true.
Well, I got my hands on Iron Man purely by another one of those mind-numbing coincidences I always talk about. I had left DC Comics after working a year there, and I brought David Michelinie with me, who was my writing partner at DC. And back then, in those days, when on the newsstand, they kind of knew 6 months in advance which books were going to sell and which ones were going to be canceled. So Iron Man was one of the books that was slated to be canceled, but they had a contract to do 6 more issues. So the policy was to move the A-list guys off and then put us on to finish out the run. That way we got a chance to train on the job. We got to do stuff. And Iron Man was one of those characters that I used to make my own comic books when I was a kid. In fact, Doom Quest, one of my more famous stories, was something I did at 11 years old on notebook paper. So never throw anything out. I jumped at the chance. I convinced Dave, trust me, take this. And I asked them, can I change a few things? And they're like, well, we don't care. We're going to cancel the book. Do what you want. And so 6 issues later, it went from being near cancellation to becoming one of their top 10 books. Because we created the Tony Stark that you know now. And the rest is history. I first went to Hollywood in 2007 to work on the Iron Man special features for the very first movie, which was kind of fun. I got to sit there and sit by the fireplace, and Uncle Bob tells you about the history of Iron Man. They used me to talk about the history of the comic up till the time of the movie. But while I was out there, I met a whole bunch of people, and I really got the bug to do something new. I had done everything in comics. I had owned 2 comic book companies. I was a writer, editor, publisher. I'd done everything but put the staples in the damn books, right? So I was looking for a new challenge. There was nothing left in comics for me to do, and the idea of motion pictures and television became very, very fascinating. So after Iron Man 2 was over, I actually got a call from Nicktoons, Nickelodeon. And the guy who was the showrunner there, Brandon Allman, said, hey, look, we've been stealing most of your ideas for the Iron Man Armored Adventures TV show anyway. He goes, I thought, if you're out here, why don't you just write some yourself? So my very first job was writing Iron Man for Nicktoons. Then I got an offer to do work for Cinemax on a show called Femme Fatales. What happened was I met Michael Olmos, who introduced me to Edward James Olmos, who became my mentor at Hollywood. And with Eddie, I worked on a number of pictures and a lot of spec scripts and things like that. But Eddie taught me how to transition from comics to film. He was such a great mentor and a great friend, and I love him. I wanted to get a shout out to Ed here too, because he was such a major influence in my life, and I was so grateful to have him with me. So I have my own production company now.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Marco. Happy birthday to you. Now pan over to Marco. There you go. Happy birthday, buddy. Thank you.